so much of what we talk about is why are those other people wrong? And that talk isn't usually reason, evidence, and arguments. It's usually motivation, incentives. What we're saying about the anti-X people is they're motivated wrong, they have bad incentives, they have bad information, they're stupid, they're biased, maybe they're even questionable morality.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's a larger percentage of what we tend to talk about than why we are pro-X. But why is it so natural to go there? Is it so natural to go there because we're so convinced that pro-X is right? We need an explanation for the other people, right? But this is the key. If you're on the anti-X side and you decide, I'm gonna give an honest effort at listening to the pro-X side. I'm actually going to peek over the wall and see what those people are about. The thing you are most likely to hear when you look over the wall is this stuff. You're most likely to hear those people questioning your motivation, your incentives, thinking you're stupid, thinking you're biased. It's amazing to me how much of theoretically our most reasoning people, Sam Harris and company, if you actually listen to what they're talking about, a large percentage of it is this. So for any given topic, the topic is X, and there's a bunch of people who are pro-X, right? Those people sit around and talk amongst themselves about their arguments for why they are pro-X, right? That's part of what they do. But they run out of that material very quickly because those arguments don't tend to change much, right? There's the reason you're pro-nuclear tend to be the same reasons, and they are what they are. And among other people that are pro-nuclear, you can only talk about that stuff so long. Those arguments tend to be reason, evidence based. In other words, you are pro-nuclear for good reasons. You think you're in the correct place. And even if it might be a difficult transition, if somebody convinced you that you were wrong on these things, you would change your position, right?
Yes.
I think that's true of most people and where they stand. That doesn't mean that everybody has fully investigated the reason they're a thing. Sometimes they just join a tribe, like a family member of mine might take my word for a political thing because they know I think about it more than they do, or something like that. But they still think they're joining the right side. They think they're there for a good reason, right? They're not there just, most people want to be on the right side, I guess, right? It's a human nature.
I agree with that, but I don't agree that they want to use reason, evidence, and arguments, because they say science is the language of the oppressor. You can't unravel the house of the master with the tools of the master, stuff like that.
That exists 100%. I think it is a tiny minority.
Okay,
tiny minority. There are.
Yeah, and I would not say that for a person before we start the discussion. That can show, it may show during the discussion, but I would not disqualify someone and say, I don't want to talk with him because I assume he's unrational. That doesn't work. No, so we have to engage, and then we'll find out, is the other person willing to follow reason, evidence, and argument?
Right.
But not everybody is.
No, not everybody is, but again, I think that we have a very loud minority there, and most people are rational whether they like it or not. They can't help but be rational. You know what I mean? We are rational.
Absolutely.
So we agree on that. So I won't go further, but I think it's true that people don't reason their way through many things. But I think the reason for that is more about the complexity of those things and the difficulty of them and the sheer quantity of them. In other words, we're rational, but we are limited in our ability to reason. We have a certain capacity for reasoning, and we operate way underwater most of the time. So we can't take the time to make rational decisions on all the things we need to. That doesn't mean that we don't want to be on the right side and that we're not rational. It just means we're overwhelmed. Right, which is part of the whole thing behind this QPARQ, taking disagreeing experts and having them boil it out for us so that we don't have to do that. All right, so this is the idea here, is that there's arguments. The other thing we talk about, though, is the side B side. So part of what we talk about is the reasons we're pro-X, but then there's also this anti-X group that exists, right? And so we also talk about them. We say, what's up with those people? That's a larger percentage of what we tend to talk about than why we are pro-X, right?
Yeah.
We don't sit around
Yeah.
and talk about why we're pro-X because that's, again, that stuff stays the same. The anti-X stuff is always changing. They're always, the anti-X people are always up to something. And so there's always something new to talk about, right? So much of what we talk about is why are those other people wrong? And that talk isn't usually reason, evidence, and arguments. It's usually motivation, incentives. What we're saying about the anti-X people is they're motivated wrong, they have bad incentives, they have bad information, they're stupid, they're biased, maybe they're even questionable morality.
Absolutely.
Right? And
Totally
why,
agree.
but why does that why is it so natural to go there? Is it so natural to go there because we're so convinced that pro-X is right? We need an explanation for the other people, right? So a lot of this is natural. It's natural that this happens, and it's not, but this is the key. If you're on the anti-X side and you decide, I'm gonna give an honest effort at listening to the pro-X side. I'm actually going to peek over the wall and see what those people are about. The thing you are most likely to hear when you look over the wall is this stuff. You're most likely to hear those people questioning your motivation, your incentives, thinking you're stupid, thinking you're biased, even if they do it in the, it's amazing to me how much of theoretically our most reasoning people, Sam Harris and company, if you actually listen to what they're talking about, a large percentage of it is this. And it's an extension of this stuff, these arguments. But what's difficult to find is people consolidating their good arguments. Like if I'm anti-X and I look over the wall, what I'm looking for is a good consolidation of the green thing, right? That's what I'm hoping to see.
Yeah.
Instead, I see all this. And
Absolutely.
it's difficult to even find this sometimes in any good consolidated way, because the people who are pro-X and have been pro-X their whole life or whatever, they know all that stuff. They don't need to sit around and consolidate it. And ironically, unfortunately, this is exactly symmetrical. So these guys, it's 100% symmetrical. So you've got the same thing both sides.
I've seen that. Also, and by the way, Felix and I are great examples of exactly that on a professional level. This is what we did. And I totally agree, it's always the red thing. And the other side is corrupt, the nuclear lobby and so on, which is when you are on the other side, it's ridiculous. We always said, I tried to work for the nuclear lobby and I did that for 8 years, but I haven't found it so far.
So what this is each person, most people, again, this is most, and nothing's 100%, but by far to me, most people believe they're operating in good faith. They think they're on the right side, and they think they're operating in good faith. And there are few things more triggering, to use that word. There's few things more emotionally stirring a negative emotional sentiment than to see other people questioning these things about you. Right? It's very.
Totally agree. But I think there's a reason for that. The reason is that the arena we're playing this game in normally is media or YouTube, whatever. So it's a public space. There, of course, you will be good if you use the red. Then people would share and like you, and that's why the red is more attractive.
Social media makes the red worse, but I would argue that that the problems there, if you take away the social media too, the problem is ancient and age old. And
yes, I agree.
Because there's so much to talk about here.
Yeah.
It's just what you're more likely to hear. It's why people start to divide in camps. So my whatever capstone of this whole little presentation is this little diagram, which I think I've got 2 versions of it. So it's a little deep, but side A's impression, this circle represents side A's impression that side B is a bunch of obnoxious idiots whose arguments suck, right? To the extent that side A believes that, they are more likely to badmouth side B and denigrate side B's arguments. And the more they do that, the more likely side B is to think that side A is a bunch of obnoxious idiots whose arguments must suck.
Absolutely.
Which causes them to say more bad things about side B, which causes them to whatever. It's a terrible reinforcing system. I think I've got another version. Yeah, this is
But
the
I think
more,
there's
this
two
is the cruder
important
version.
reasons. There's two important reasons why this must be the case, or why we're prone as humans, we're prone to do that. One is we're tribal.
I kind of think this is part of why we're tribal. You know what I
You're
mean?
tribal.
I don't think, you know, that's my point. This reinforces the tribal.
Exactly. And we're deeply, we have this embedded, and we're deeply tribal, and we have to be very careful not to be. That the second point is you have the slow and the fast mode of thinking. So, you know, that the slow mode is you think, you calculate, it uses a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And I mean energy in terms of calories in your body. And
yeah.
that's why humans have learned not to use that system unless necessary. So if you have a hunch and it works, for example, you hear something, you know, in the trees, you run, you don't think. And I think the way these arenas we have here now, and we discuss in YouTube and all that, promote more like this threat type of argument.
No,
we have it before YouTube, but I totally agree.
But here's the thing, a thing that I think this brings out, that's, again, there was that cause and effect. Coming up with this, thinking about this made me think of the cause and effect a little differently. You know, like where is the actual root cause on this thing? And to me, I think part of the root cause is, actually back this up to this again. This illustrates where this is a case where unilateral disarmament is to your benefit. In other words, the more a side can just stop doing the red thing, just stop, right? And I've got this problem with James Lindsay in a big way, because James Lindsay lives in this red box. His Twitter account is just like, he couldn't be a more rational person, but he just thrives on this, on shit talking the other side. It's just, and I just go, what are you doing? Because anybody here that's taking an honest look and going, who is this James Lindsay guy? He's going to read one tweet and never look at another thing he says. Never look at another thing he says. Why would you? And I don't get it. Like, there's zero. All you do on that point is when somebody looks over, if it was the case that when I peek over the wall, all I see is arguments, and I don't see them saying anything demeaning about me at all, well, I'm far more interested in learning more and figuring it out. So
and that's the way academia is supposed to work, and
yes,
more or less does, or at least should. Let's leave that out. But that's the idea, that you have disagreements and you cultivate those disagreements and you find better solutions. But purely on the green one, there's always the red ones as well. But good academia is actually the green part of things.
Yes,
so what
ideal
I'm saying is,
academia.
what we need to have is arenas that protect the green and exclude the red as best as we can.
Well, that's
those
what I mean.
Arenas must be built, and social media is not one of them.
No, and that is a whole bunch of the design at QPARQ is exactly about this. Is there's zero place for any of the red stuff. It's literally, what's your green? Okay, what's my green? Okay, where do our greens disagree? You know, and let's dive into that. But I think another dynamic in this whole thing we haven't touched on is a thing I return to a lot is complexity and bias are the big stoppers. In other words, it's this is why even before social media, if people get down for a good faith debate, I mean, I spent a lot of years trying to find great examples of productive debate, and it's amazing where people are super smart, super knowledgeable, so they're both intelligent and well informed, and operating in good faith, and we'll sit and talk for 3 hours, and you see such limit in the productivity of that. And I think the two reasons are complexity and bias. They're the two main underlying root causes of that, is because there's so much territory in a meaningful disagreement, and it's so difficult to find your path and find the structure productively. There's just too many places to go, and both and each side's thinking is almost by definition biased in terms of the material, the information that they tend to view, how they tend to interpret it. is just riddled with bias top to bottom. Like the whoever produced the information is biased. The way we consume information is through our own biases, and it's just too much to sort out. So part of the motivation of QPARQ is to try to do that analytical breakdown to make it possible to dive
absolutely.
deeper than we possibly can. Just conversation is inappropriate. So I think part of why we end up in the red is just we fail at the green and get frustrated, and we fall back to the red.
Yeah, but there's a lot of reasons, I think. Again, the groupish thing and the unwillingness to, for example, if I tell you you have 100 apples and you add 10% of apples,
yeah,
okay, and you remove 10%, how many apples do you have?
How many do we start with?
100 plus 10% and minus 10%. How many apples do you have?
Oh, well, I can do that. That's 99
you see,
apples.
But you don't want to, but you tend to say 100, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. And that, of course, is when you do the math with the wrong system. If you do the math with the fast system, it returns 100. But of course, if you think, you will find out it's 100 plus 10 is 110. Right. 110 minus 11 is 99, not 100. And we have a tendency to fall back on the other side on intuition, on, you know, there's a lot of incentives in ourselves to have us go back onto the red side. Steven Pinker says the reason why, it's a theory and it doesn't matter whether it's right or not, but one idea is that language has evolved because you wanted to badmouth others. That means you say, hey, this guy is a free rider, because in early societies, free riders are a real problem. So that's one of the suggestions is language has developed for that in order to, you know, talk about someone, gossip and all that is really was important. So as these are old mechanisms, they're deep. So you need a very strong arena to take this out. And for example, the political arena is one that has not succeeded in doing that at all. It's emotion versus emotion. Because of the tribal nature of humans, and because of the underlying unwillingness to engage into the real calculation. Oh, it's 99, not 100. If you can avoid it, just don't. It's just
I get that, but one thing that encourages me or that motivates me is that I think once you get that, like I knew what you were doing there because I'm a math person, so I just, you know, I got that, but I know plenty of people who would have knee-jerks at 100, right?
Exactly. That's when you use the wrong system.
But once you show them, they're very unlikely to make that same mistake again. And that's an example of what I was saying earlier when I say people are fundamentally rational. In other words, it's hard for them to unsee the reason. You know, the problem with a lot of our arguments that goes back to the complexity and bias make it very difficult to find those key things. And if you are on a side whose argument's weak, whether you know it or not, whether you're depending on a weak side, there is almost a force field that will keep you away from that. You know, so
there's a lot of forces acting on that force field.
Yeah.
That's just they're all going into the wrong direction.
True.
So but what have a very strong arena, I call these arenas of discussion, a good and strong arena which doesn't allow for example, if you take the university, it works on the green level in principle. But again, also there you have those tendencies to the red, and you have to make a very strong system that avoids people to go to the red kind of thing. Otherwise you start to beat up each other.
Yes. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And part of the inspiration, again, for QPARQ is to overcome the force field, basically, is to say, you know, there it is. Yes, you can go anywhere else you want, but there's that question. And I do feel so many of these things do come down to killer arguments that, you know, part of my frustration is just a citizen in topics like climate change, nuclear energy, things like that, is I'll hear an argument made by a person and I'll think, oh, if that's true, that's a game changer for my thinking. And then it's so difficult to find a true rebuttal to that. It reminds me of the magnets that you can't push together, they slide past each other, right? It's like, and you just go, okay, why isn't anyone engaged in that argument? It's obviously a very important argument. And oftentimes it's just, well, that person's not worth listening to, you know, a lot of ad hominem kind of stuff, whatever happens, a whole bunch of other arguments, but not that one. And I'm just like, well, there's got to be an answer to that. That's either true or false. So
Totally agree.
I
But
feel
again, it's
like,
all about the arena, and that's why I think a concept like QPARQ is
yeah,
so important in order to force is maybe the wrong word, because we voluntarily enter that arena. But
right.
we know in this arena, it's difficult to bullshit your way out.
Exactly. A
It
lot of
will
this
be
is, where is the bullshit? Where is the bullshit?
exactly.
And part of what makes that, this almost sounds like I'm in the red part right now a little bit, but I believe that lots of people don't know where their own bullshit is, and that force field that they themselves are erecting and maintaining is in their they're not conscious of it. They think they're in the right spot here. So it's so easy to, and oftentimes people who come in with a unconventional view, the heretics that sometimes every once in a while come in and change everything are by definition, they're very open to ad hominem. By definition, they're outsiders, you know. So it's
Yeah.
and I'm always just interested in, I don't care who they are. They made an argument, you know.
Yeah.
Address the argument. If it's stupid, then tell us why it's stupid. Yeah,
But you hear that a lot, that when you have another argument, it doesn't fit your narrative, it's
yeah,
blasphemy.
well,
Have you
and that's part of the
seen?
problem is any person who knows less about a topic can be fooled by the person who knows more. And that's another thing we just have to accept and acknowledge, that I tend to have this, my wife calls it gullibility. It is gullibility, I guess. I mean, if I'm easily convinced by a person who lays out what sounds like a case, but again, you don't know where the bullshit is. You have no idea where the bullshit is. And I believe oftentimes the person talking to you also doesn't know where the bullshit is. The person making the case doesn't know where the bullshit is.
Totally
And
agree.
yeah,
I've seen
so
that. I've made arguments which in the end turned out to be bogus, but I didn't know at the time. I
right,
believed in my own argument. That's
yeah,
the worst.
which is one of my ways to easily dispense with the red stuff, is just give the other side the benefit of the doubt. It gives you no, it takes nothing away from you.
Absolutely.
It does
But
no
that
harm.
only works. That only works if you can live with both answers. If so, for example, if the disagreement is there a God? You cannot accept anything green from the other side, because it would take away the rug under your feet. It would be a
Yeah,
problem. You can.
yeah,
So you need to be able to be open to the result. If the result is your own destruction, or again, as I said
yes,
previously, if your salary depends on not understanding it, you will
right,
not.
yes. Well, not every argument needs to be settled. Not every disagreement needs to be an
Yeah,
argument.
yeah,
Yeah.
true, absolutely
and,
true.
and,
Yeah,
and that's another theme of QPARQ, is
yeah, but you should maybe,
you're not necessarily going to resolve anything. You're just going to understand why you disagree,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
helpful to the third party. It's so
Mhm.
helpful to me. It's why you get a second opinion from a doctor, is, you know, if you can find two experts that disagree, then you suddenly have to know so much less in order to get an understanding for where you need to focus your
Yeah.
attention. Because yeah, where the bullshit is the, it's impossible to figure out if the person who you're talking to knows more about a topic than you do, because all they have to do is point to some
Yeah.
information that you're not familiar with, and you don't know whether the information's bad, whether they're interpreting it inappropriately, whether it's outweighed by better information. And, you know, you have no idea
Thankful for that.
why they're
But
wrong.
I think that's important for the sales speech. What you do here, the slide that is now on screen, is that should motivate people to do more of that, because everybody has experienced that. So actually, that would be a great sales pitch for people like Pete Boghossian or whomever you're
Right,
talking to.
right. You follow Brett Weinstein?
Yes.
Did you follow I don't think we've talked about this yet. The Weinstein and Yuri. Oh, what's the guy's name? Shoot.
About what topic was
I
it?
think he's Russian,
Yeah.
on
Okay.
COVID treatment in general. Brett came out fairly aggressive and early on,
Yeah.
as treatments are way being ignored, and there's solid evidence that they could have a, you know, he made very large claims about the potential impact on the epidemic of embracing some of this. And again, time spent in the green box when he first rolled all this stuff out. And then you had, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. That's frustrating.
I don't know them anyways because I don't follow COVID debates. They're
Okay.
just too frustrating for me. So I don't,
Okay.
not in detail. I just know
all right,
high
that's
level.
fine. The net result of this thing was two people that are as green box as they get. And Sam Harris ended up coming in on this as well. As green box of human beings as you would think are possible. And now none of them will speak to each other. I think even privately is the impression you get.
When he said he rescinded his membership card to the dark web.
To the IDW, right, to the intellectual dark web. And I've heard Sam Harris make the case that he hasn't really said necessarily wrong or right, but he said, I'm not going to engage Weinstein because it's interesting because he assumes Weinstein's wrong, although he doesn't necessarily say that, but it's implied in his reasoning. His reasoning is because it's too consequential to society to show this as an open debate, because too many people who are already vaccine hesitant might say, oh, what I'm learning now, it puts me over the edge and I'm not going to. So in other words, there's real life and death consequences to arguing this in a public forum. That was sort of Sam Harris's side. But of course, I would think Brett Weinstein would say, yes, exactly, which is why we need to, because if I'm right, if my conclusions are true, then we're having the exact same life and death impact in the opposite direction. So it really comes down, from my perspective now, comes down to who's right. You have to engage these arguments. But then Sam Harris also points out that some of the things we've talked about, you and I have talked about before, if you're not an expert in the area, then that engagement is not necessarily going to be productive.
No,
and it's
but
too
I think
easy.
There's an additional argument. I mean, the novel thing with QPARQ is actually it's like combines the public arena and the more intellectual type of guy. So who is talking with? Is it two specialists? If Felix and I talked without an audience, it would be totally different. And here, what we do is sort of it's like if you opened a discussion at the university. I mean, a green discussion. Yeah. But now you open, and it's totally green. Assume for a second you have A and B on a fully green level, and then you publish it, or you have spectators or whatever. Yep. And they, of course, don't necessarily, they're not on the green side. Maybe they don't even understand some of the issues on the green side. So what do? They revert back to the red side. So it's really difficult on how you open this QPARQ. Not everybody can have discussions like that. You need to be knowledgeful. But to me, public, it doesn't work.
But I see that. A couple of really important things now I want to get on this in terms of what you just said is, I think any two people who are taking a public position can come in here, should be able to come in here, because if they're taking a public position, then they're not necessarily the best person to explain that position, but they ought to be able to explain why they themselves are in that place.
Yes.
And then they may discover that some of their underlying things aren't as supported as they think they are on either side, potentially. So that's one thing. And to me, if you're going to come out publicly and do that, then you ought to be willing to enter this with anybody credible on the other side, or anybody,
but again,
who's doing the equivalent on the other side. Sorry, what?
When you have an audience around this discussion at some point, then of course you will definitely have the red, because the audience is not bound to any QPARQ.
No, I don't care about the audience. But that's
can go south.
They can do that. They can do that on Twitter.
They can do it exactly. Yeah.
But here, but the other thing I really want to say is that this again is fantasy for me. This is like, if only the world could go this. I'd like to live in a world where I say that phrase a lot. I'd like to live in a world where it might start with some public people who aren't necessarily the experts in that area, but especially as those underlying disagreements become defined, pull in the right person. Because as you define those underlying disagreements, when Brett Weinstein says this body of studies have a lot of weight for me in my position. Well, he might not be the right person to individually defend each study, but somebody is.
Yeah, true.
And Sam Harris might not be the right person to individually
Yeah.
take apart each study, but somebody is. And
I
this
totally
could just,
agree.
how quickly could this lay that out? And then for me, who cares about, okay, somebody said that study is not super reliable because they didn't do a good enough job isolating the blinds or whatever it was, you know, okay, is that true? Now, you know, in a casual conversation, we're not going to get into that. We're just going to sort of
Yes.
brush by it.
Oh,
But
totally
here,
agree.
I can click it and I can see the best pro and the best con against that.
Yeah.
And somewhere in there might be the killer arguments. And in fact, each side believes the killer arguments are in there, but, you know, breaking to their own side. But we can't continue to dance around the high level stuff and not engage the actual
Yes.
stuff that matters. And that's why I think a thing
I
like
totally
this
agree.
is needed, so that we don't just
Yeah.
brush it off. We go, oh, I know how to settle this. Get this person and this person into the QPARQ format, and we are guaranteed to see the best argument from each side, including responses to the other side. If there's any underlying disagreements, they can explore those or hand them off to the better people to explore those. And
Yeah.
there is a bottom here. These things aren't bottomless. It's just we never get. We always we dive, and then we run out of oxygen and we surface, and then we dive and we run out of oxygen and we surface.
Yeah.
It's like the answer is just this much deeper. We got to stop going back up to the surface, get our oxygen tanks on, go down there and actually.
But you made a very important point where you said it's not necessarily Felix and I, which I would say for, at least for me, we're not the ultimate expert in all these questions of different fields. Some fields are hydrology, some are climate, some are electricity. I mean, you have so many fields, you don't even, but if you say, I quote the study of autism and vaccines, and you come back and say, well, here is the newspaper saying that this is, it's retracted and so on. So that is important. And maybe I have not taken that into consideration enough. You're not the expert, or I'm not the expert on anything, but I can say I learned it here. If you tell me it's wrong or it's retracted, I base my argument on something that you tell me is retracted. I better change my opinion. Otherwise, I look foolish. So,
well, and honestly, that fascinates me, because I think, because I do believe that most people are operating good faith, because I do also believe that most people are rational, can't unsee, like we talked about earlier, can't unsee that math thing once they see it. It feels to me like some of these things will, of necessity, resolve. You know, I know that seems unreasonable as an expectation, but I do think it's possible. Especially in this argument with Weinstein and the person I can't remember the name of, whatever their arguments are, they are both insanely rational, and yet they were unable to publicly or privately engage the green on green. And I just go, oh, if only I could get them into here, because it was very detailed. There were very detailed, specific, rational arguments.
Yeah.
And
but once you of course don't even allow the discussion, you say, if you start this discussion, you're banned. I mean, then of course, well, no, obviously, opposite of QPARQ. You know, if you say this discussion cannot be, well, okay, then that's difficult.
No, that's an extreme example. Well, that's the end result of this dynamic. Yeah. That's the end result. This dynamic has built up so far that people are so convinced that side A is so convinced that side B is a bunch of obnoxious idiots whose arguments suck, that the only right answer is to quiet them.
Yeah, but it gets even worse when the system moderator, so here it's you, but there it's, I don't know what they're called in Twitter and so on, they say you're not allowed to use that word, but your argument relies on using it, then it's difficult. So this, it's broken from the outset. You cannot use the arguments.
Yeah, and it's I think even more insidious than that. The thing that truly depresses me is the tinkering with algorithms behind the scenes. The idea that when you that there is some decision being made about what results to show you. Who'd have ever thought that that's where Google was going to go? That some human beings are saying it'd be better if we showed people these things, like, for purely political reasons. It's like, oh my goodness, how doesn't anyone see that that's terrible?
But you had that in the analogical world. I mean, I know people, they only read their own,
Yeah.
they're never surprised by anything they read because that's what they expect. And yes,
Right.
this is the right
Right.
way. So
Yeah. What do they call it? PAL review instead of peer review or something like that. And like that, well, we said earlier about the ideal of academia. Some of what it seems like
exactly.
some of where
And I
academia has
think,
headed has
yeah.
been away from that.
And I think you're
Unfortunately.
headed in that direction with this idea. Let's see how it flies. But the idea is exactly what we need. So yeah.
All right. Well, that's
I must hope there are more people who like to engage. Well, I can't leave the house at the home because of COVID, but
Oh,
in
you're
the end,
kidding.
it's the same.
Oh my goodness. So you said you didn't follow that debate. Is that, I'm surprised by that. You seem like a type of person who would, or is it just like it's you're not going to change anything anyway? So
Yeah, it's more that, but I believe more in the science kind of thing. And at least in Switzerland, you have many people who have extremely unrational arguments. They wouldn't even claim they're rational. They wouldn't claim. They say it's as a dictatorship in Switzerland and all. So this is unpleasant as a discussion. It's really,
sure.
it's very red as a discussion. And as you said, even a green discussion turns red pretty fast.
Yeah.
So that's why I haven't followed. I mean, I have, but I don't. You're talking about I cannot say what it is. Discussion about this special medicine.
Yeah.
I think. Mm-hmm.
I think that that's probably true. And but I would encourage you to think. I would encourage you to think about the people who are worried about the dictatorship stuff. Think they're right.
Okay.
For completely rational, they think it's rational, and this is
Yeah,
what the street epistemology does a good job of this, of just completely being no offense at all, no defense, just 100%. Let the other side make their green case and draw the green case out of the other side, and let the other side discover for themselves how well substantiated it is. But I this is part of me being maybe too gullible of a person, and whoever I listen to the most, I tend to begin to, I don't want to say believe, but I'm fooled by the experts on whatever side.
I'm similar. I'm similar. Yeah.
And I think that well, that's why it's important to listen to both sides. But the point is that there are conspiracy oriented people, but I think that there are some underlying arguments that again just need to be engaged as opposed to written off.
I agree, but you cannot specialize in all the discussions. Also, something 100%. That interests me is the whole university kind of politics. That is interesting. The climate and then energy. That are my
what gets your attention, and everybody's.
I have the luxury that I can choose the topics I want to engage in. So that's good.
Yeah. To me, I think too many things sparkle for me. That's part of why I get
overwhelmed. I know the problem. But I have to focus at least. That's really,
well, this is why I'm focused on this. I try to focus on this so that I can get further on all these things that sparkle for me based on other people's work.
Exactly. I'm glad to assist. So in the end, you have the right opinion about nuclear. I'm working on that. Well,
I don't know. I think there should be plenty of people who, on a volunteer basis, be interested enough to help us keep learning and processing.
Everybody's complaining about Twitter. Everybody, also the ones using it and living from it, they hate it. And then they should be able to do that. But again, this is work. What we do here is you sweat, you think, you use a lot of energy. It's really a problem. So you gotta like to do that, which I do, but I understand everybody who doesn't, because
so many of these topics, though, that is justified. We need to sweat. They're too important. That's one of the things that drove me crazy.
I mean, you do some sports as well, and it is. It's not. I mean, you don't like. You have to go out. It's -10 Celsius. You have to go out. You don't do that if you don't really have to. And it's the same here. You have a tendency to fall back on reddish arguments and leave the green because it's just more comfortable. It's easier.
It's easier. Quick. Yeah, and they're always up to something. Like I said, the other side's always doing something. So it's an easy target. It's part of what makes it easier.
And if you're looking for the nuts on the other side, you will always find some at any
yes.
whatever
Oh,
the
yes.
discussion is. If you do nut picking,
Yeah.
you'll always be successful.
Oh,
always.
exactly. And again, if you look over the wall and all the other side's doing is talking about the nuts on your side, then you immediately write off the other side. You're like, well, if they're basing my position on Alex Jones, then what the hell am I even going to talk to them about? Or whatever.
And that's wrong. That's plain wrong. So moving to the green side is really, yeah, it's great, but it's rewarding. I need to say, it's like if you go out for a run, you didn't want to initially, then you come back and you're happy, you're satisfied. It's really, and you have that here too. It's like doing your run.
Yeah, they say I don't like running, but I like having run.
Exactly. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
I think that's but that is the problem with morality. You have it here in questionable morality. I would take out questionable. As soon as you invoke morality, that just means my point of view is more valid than yours. I don't give you arguments for it, but it's more moral. I just state that.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. You're right.
To do that, I think you can drop the word questionable.
No, I think you're right. As soon as you dive into morality, but it's
morality.
But morality is another one of those things that I think most people do agree on naturally. I don't think we differ in morality as much as people think we differ in morality.
I totally agree. I
think we question the other side because we need an explanation for why they're on a side that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but that's why
I think we only go there because we fail to connect on the evidence and arguments. So we feel a need to push it into something else. So that's when we go from green to red. What's that?
You should try to avoid it. It's right. Red is the right color for the issue. Put them in red. If you talk morality, what does that even mean? I'm more moral than you because I'm for nuclear and you're for fossil. So I'm
again, and this is exactly the kind of thing that I was saying. You'll be surprised how much people like Harris do this. It's how much time they're in the red. Just even because they're talking to their audience and their audience already thinks they're on the right side. So there's just a tone to it that's offensive for anybody else that looks over the wall. And if you're in that club, you don't even hear it. But
again, they're also trapped in this kind of thinking. And again, also these rules you have in those different arenas are like that, and especially the algorithms that the redder it gets, the higher it ranks. So they're sort of, they can't choose. They're in that arena, whether they want to or not. So they have to, at least to some extent.
Probably true. You run out of real value, real progress there. There is no real value or progress because of the damage you're doing to your own side when the other side looks over the wall. That's the thing that drives me. It's self-inflicted damage.
And I've been there. We've done that to ourselves as well. I mean, it's not. I've been there, done that.
Oh, I think it's human nature.
Not willingly, obviously.
No, exactly. You have to be aware of it and then constantly remind yourself not to do it. I laugh off people on quote unquote the other side of whatever issue all the time. I mean, it's a natural, especially when you're talking to somebody that you know agrees with you. That's the tribal thing. It's
so strong and powerful.
Yeah, it is. It's like, I want to belong. I want to get along with you. I want to confirm that you and I are on the same side. And no better way to do that than to define what the other side is and how they're different than us. Yeah.
But that's what they say. I mean, you had America versus USSR at the time. Then America's united. But if you had now a war with the extraterrestrials, man, we would unite against them.
So good. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we solved everything. So good.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to remember to not waste time following all the red stuff myself on social media and all that stuff, because I'll just get caught up in that. I'll sit there and just waste ridiculous amounts of time reading things that will never have an impact on my life one way or the other, or that I will never have an impact on. It's just stupid.
But we're all in the same trap. It's designed to pull us into the red stuff. It's designed to.
Yeah.
They want to make money. They're not trying to change the world for the better or whatever. They're trying to make money, which is okay. That's the arena they're in. So it's a commercial arena, and that's why it's like that. But I don't like to spend too much time on that because it's just not helpful.
No,
I don't learn enough there.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot more meaning and potential for actual progress by avoiding that.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
with us, it's now it's dinner time.
Oh, enjoy dinner. And
Dark outside.
yeah, and it's, oh wow, it's after lunchtime here. I don't know how long this was, but I apologize and thank you at the same time.
It was really great. Thanks for
Good.
the discussion. It's good.
Yep. Okay, and maybe we'll speak again well, when next time it becomes fruitful to do it.
Exactly, and you will be the judge of that, unless I have a question where I
Yeah,
had trouble
absolutely.
before.
Yeah, you're as good a judge as I am. Just let me know. So, all right.
Hey, thanks. Thanks
Bye.
for the talk.
Yeah,
Have a good day.
you too.
Bye.
You know, I was thinking the other day, there shouldn't even be time zones, right? Like if we were starting now,
Yeah.
it would be the same time everywhere. And we would just know that in Switzerland, they, go to bed at whatever time, you know what I mean? The time zone is just way unnecessarily confusing. But I think that's
Totally
partially because I struggle with them so badly. It's just a mental block for me to do the time conversions.
It is, and you have so many already in the US alone, right?
Oh, I thought you meant so many mental blocks, but yeah.
No. No, but I'm
Also
saying,
true.
everything I say is misquoted and used against me at the court of law.
Well, that's maybe just how my brain's working this morning.